A patchwork quilt is made up of blocks of material. The blocks that I've chosen for these quilts are 6 inches finished measurement, but we need to make an allowance for the seams on the different shapes as we sew them. So the cutting measurements will be different for each of the 3 different shape blocks that we're going to sew. The other important thing is to make sure that you're sewing an accurate seam allowance, whatever your seam allowance is. Now I've chosen 1/4 inch because that's the foot on my machine and that's the standard measurement commonly used. So what I'm going to sew together to show how to check the accuracy of your seam allowance are 4 strips. I've chosen contrasting colours because it makes it easier to measure, and I've cut 2-inch strips. Now these centre strips, when I've taken the 1/4 inch off each side of them, should measure 1.5 inches wide when they're sewn, and the edge strips, which have only lost 1 seam allowance, should measure 1 3/4 inches when they're sewn. So lining up the edge of your material with the foot and sewing should create a perfect 1/4 inch seam. So the crucial measurement here is from the needle to the right hand side of the foot, which is running along the fabric, and that's where the 1/4 inch is measured. And I'll just press those seams. If we measure the seam allowance, we can see it's spot on 1.5 inches for those centre pieces there, and it's pretty much spot on 1 3/4 inches for that outer piece there. Now if you've taken too much of a seam allowance when you're sewing the pieces together, these pieces would come out smaller, and if you've taken too small a seam allowance, they'll come out larger. But if you measure your seam allowance and it's absolutely spot on, but they're still not accurate when they're sewn, the chances are that the inaccuracy will have come when you were cutting. So you'd have to go back to your cutting and see whether perhaps you're cutting to one side of the measurement rather than exactly on the line.